Hi everybody, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to It Takes Two, a podcast where two people take two movies with the same plot or premise and watch and discuss them.
Yes, and in this week's episode we got free tickets. Thank you to Madman for supplying those free tickets. You know, it's just one of the perks of being a internationally recognised podcast.
No, we won them in a competition. But still, thank you to Madman.
Yeah.
I guess we'll tag Madman in something to thank them for this.
Yeah.
Largely because we weren't actually planning on doing an episode on these movies.
Yeah, it was just a nice set of consequences. Consequences?
Coincidences.
Thank you. Saying that I don't remember what the name of the movies are, and I normally do that, but...
That's fine. Petite Maman and When Marnie Was There.
Yeah, tiny woman and...
Little mother.
Marnie is arriving.
Yes.
I think starting off, obviously, both these movies are not in English, which is why I don't have any notes, because I was easier to read and watch.
This is the first time Nick has literally zero notes.
I am noteless.
He's noteless.
Go on, continue.
Well, okay, I'm gonna put the spoiler warning here.
Massive spoilers.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There will be spoilers. We're always spoiling things around here. Also, Petite Maman is quite a new film. It's still in cinemas at the moment while we're recording this. Probably will still be when we release it.
Probably.
So, new film. But the reason I put the spoiler in here is because I'm about to do a spoiler immediately. Can you understand? Because I've seen When Marnie Was There before, and Nick hadn't. And I said something to you before we watched it, and I just want to know, can you understand why, when I watched it first, I thought it was a coming-of-age gay film?
100%.
I watched, I've just watched it again, and the whole way I was like, I feel bad that this lesbian is going to find out that that's her grandmother. She's just a small baby lesbian, and she falls in love with her own grandmother. In my head, that's the plot of that movie.
Is she a lesbian, though?
I mean, they follow a lot of tropes for that kind of coming-of-age gay film. Like, she's very much... she has got the short hair, she wears a lot of shorts and dungarees and things, and she rejects femininity. When they want her to wear a dress, she gets real upset about it. And yet she's drawn to Marnie, who is very feminine. She's a total loner at school, and all the other girls don't, have some... They, want to say something about her, but don't want to say it in front of her mother, and, so she's a bit of an oddball. She feels different. She feels isolated. She dresses very masculine. She falls in love. She talks about how much she loves her so much. And the first time she meets her, she's blushing, and Marnie's all giggling and stuff, and their hold hands a lot, and she gets all embarrassed about it.
Okay, I can see it now.
She's clearly in love with her.
Okay. So yes, for me, obviously one of these movies was in Japanese, made by the lovely Studio Ghibli. Yeah. And the other one was, I guess, an independent French film. It had some award pop-up or something, a pop-up in the beginning of it, I don't remember. Maybe I'm projecting. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's Maybelline. Going into both these movies kind of blind for me was an interesting take, because it was sort of like... me watching a mystery unfold, which is some of the fascination of watching movies you don't normally watch within your, I wouldn't say comfort zone, but sort of the blanket of genres, if that makes sense. If you're going to throw your own genre blanket out, for me it wouldn't be touching either of these. I prefer something where the supernatural element is a bit more forthcoming. Where in these movies, plural, the supernatural element is not hidden, but it's not like there's no sequence where they hang out with a creepy professor on the top of a hill and end up, time traveling or something. Yeah,
it's very, very kind of soft time travel films. It's in both of them, it's crossing a distance to where it becomes time travel. So in When Marnie Was There, it's at high tide, crossing that area of the marsh, and then, travels her back, and then
I can't remember anything now. I should have taken notes. Terrible. When she goes through the forest and she's in the... Yeah. Sorry, we probably should put the premise of the starting of these movies together, so it makes more sense if you haven't seen either of them.
Yeah, so they're both movies about children processing grief.
Yeah.
So Petite Maman starts off with a little girl. Well, actually, what it starts off with, because I put it in my notes, because I took notes in the cinema. At the very beginning, it starts off with a black screen and a clock ticking. So that's your first hint that there's going to be some time shenanigans. But it starts off with a little girl in a nursing home with an older lady, and they're doing like a crossword puzzle together, and you assume it's her and her grandmother, and she says goodbye to her, and then she goes into the next room and says goodbye to another old lady, etc. And then she goes into the room where her mother is, and there's an empty bed, and they're cleaning up, and there's a cane.
She has to keep it.
Yeah, so they show you very clearly in that beginning that this is a place they've visited. She knows all these ladies, but her own grandmother is gone. Yeah.
And then they go and they're going to clean up her house, and then you sort of get this sort of there's an adorably cute part where she says it's a time for a snack. And it's in French, blah blah blah. A time for a snack, which was aperitif, which in my mind was like the entree before the entree.
Yeah, I did like that they didn't translate aperitif.
Yeah.
In the subtitles, it still said aperitif, and I was like, well, we know it's a snack. But I thought that was kind of cute.
There's this
like,
adorable moment where she's sitting in the back seat eating like chips, but not chips. They're like
Cheez-Its or something.
Cheesy snacks, yeah. As a child would, so I don't think there was a lot of direction there where she's just like mouse nibbling them all the way from one end to the other. And then you have a zoom in, so the camera focuses from, I can't remember the name of the girl, and I feel bad. Nellie to the front seat where the mother's driving, and then you see a tiny arm reach around and feed her a snack, and then another snack, and then another snack, and then she like tries to hand her a juice box. Yeah. And then the mum sort of smiles of like how even her daughter's looking after her, and then she like hugs her from behind. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very sweet because the mother is obviously grieving. Yeah. And is very somber, and even when she's eating the snack, she's very somber, but then when the juice box comes around, it starts to break that kind of, and she, I think she really appreciates it.
So they end up in the grandmother's house, which is in the woods in a rural area, I'm assuming of France. And it's sort of like this sort of play-by-play of just how sort of normal everything is from Nellie's point of view, if that makes sense. But you can feel the tension sort of rising, and there's a little bit of hints talking about a dresser, I think that was the word he used, that's in the kitchen, and he pushes it aside and you get a reveal of like really old wallpaper, which is this like lime and yellow, maybe off yellow, more closely to a green, a shade of green checker pattern. And then sort of there's a moment where no, hang on. So she just passes out at that point, eh? Because I noticed in both these movies there's a lot of the time skipping aspect is literally sleep, which I thought was brilliant because in other movies they don't do it that. Yeah. What's the word? Concisely.
Consistently?
Yes, sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to.
You can't
say.
read my mind. Why not?
Yeah, there's a lot of that where it'll, and there's even, they hint to that in Petite Maman, because at one point she says, the dad's like, oh, do you want to go do this? And she's like, no, I want to go to sleep now because I want tomorrow to come quicker. Yeah. It's
a nice way of time skipping. The opposite side, when Marnie was here, you get a young girl who's not fitting in, who then has what's, I would say, a panic attack more than an asthma attack.
Yeah, it did seem more like a panic attack.
And then she suggested that she goes and stays with her auntie and uncle near the sea because it would be good. The salt air would be good for her asthma. Yeah, and she had to get away for the summer, even though she's skipping school. obviously there's a big difference between these two movies in look, which one, because one of them's animated, and obviously set in different countries.
Yeah, but there's definitely quite a similar feel to them. Yeah, because I said that to you when we were leaving the cinema. I said that is like Petite Maman is what, you know, it feels like what a live action Ghibli film would feel like.
Yeah, because there's a lot of use of the environment to set the scene, which mainly is a strong point of animated films, because you do have the time. Well, I say that you do have the time, but I think with the higher production ones, they really spend a lot of time, especially with the old Studio Ghibli movies. Ghibli.
I don't know. I said Ghibli, but I have no idea, to be honest.
Please make a note of the comments of which pronunciation you prefer. The environment being used as part of like an additional character almost, and it's easy in the old school hand animated like the backgrounds are painted.
Yeah.
But it was, because a lot of these days with the big box office movies, Avatar standing out as being not what I'm talking about. But if you said to me the lines and dialogue from any of the Marvel movies and just been like, this is who's in this scene and this is what they're saying, I could tell you what movie it's from.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be able to describe the background at all, because it's, except maybe the airport fight. In Civil War, because it's not used as well as it is in, I find, foreign film, and maybe that's budget, maybe it's a budget thing, but then The Martian did it really well. Yeah,
The Martian did do really well.
So maybe it's just a style thing. Like I can throw back to The Fifth Element, which, because we were talking about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Was it yesterday? It doesn't matter. How that, like, the environment is its own beast in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like a real world because everything is so similar but slightly different.
It's like going into one of our favourite sets of films, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
That feels real, because what they've done is they have like all these run-down statues and monuments. Like there's a monument in the forest that's overgrown and things like that. Like it feels lived in. You know, this is a world with history, and you're getting a glimpse at a certain segment of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of that in Petite Maman, in the timelessness of that forest.
Yeah.
Because she goes into the forest and she's looking for
where her mother built.
Yeah, she's looking for particular trees where her mother built a fort as a child, and what she finds is her mother as a child building that fort.
Spoilers. It's not revealed as quickly. Like for me, it was sort of, there was a click moment. So yeah, she bumps into, so her mum goes away.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. The timing of it is that she doesn't meet the young girl until her mother leaves,
because she's dealing with her own grief. And she's found like an old toy, which was a paddle ball, which required a base and an elastic string attached to a ball and a paddle. And then she, after several good whacks of it, it goes flying into the woods, and she goes to follow it and then finds another girl dragging wooden logs through the woods, and they do the most adorable wave at each other.
Yeah, the real big gesture wave. It's
and then they're just hanging out, and I was just like, in my mind when I was watching this, because this hasn't been revealed yet that it's their mother. Spoilers. We should probably say spoilers before revealing.
Oh no, that's why I got the spoiler alert right at the beginning of the
Fair enough. And yeah, they looked really similar, and then it starts raining, and they run to the house, and then the wallpaper's identical, and then there's a weird bit with a closet. And then they do the most adorable, like, dress down of their anoraks and, like, taking their coats off, and then doing the really, like, I'm doing this because adults would make me do it, but it's not, there's no effort into it, drawing the hair sequence with sound.
Yeah, the hair, and I was like, these girls don't know how to dry hair, but they're doing it because they know that's what they're supposed to do. It's very cute. There is a hint before that. She asks the girl her name, and she gives her mother's name, Marion.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so when they're building the fort, together. So the girl. So I had written that in my notes that she clicks it very soon, because they start building the fort, and she just when she realizes that this is the fort and it's in the same spot, she asks her name, and she says, "Oh, Marion," and you can see her kind of go, "Oh, okay." And then when they start to go back to the house, she stops and looks at it, and she's like, "That's the same house, but it's in the opposite direction in the woods."
Yeah.
And when they go in, she's like looking, and it's taken over in her head. And then there's the moment where they're having hot chocolate together.
Yeah.
In little bowls, which is so French.
Yeah.
It's so French to have little bowls of hot chocolate. But she gets up, or she makes an excuse since she wants to go to the bathroom, and she goes and has a look, and is like inspecting to make sure that this house is the same. Like, she's confirming her own theory.
Yeah.
And then she finds her own grandmother, and it totally freaks her out.
Yeah.
So she has this little mini panic moment. She runs and gets her jumper, or puts her jumper on inside out, and gets her anorak and stuff. And the other girl is like, "Oh, you're leaving?" She's like, "Yeah, I have to
go." Yeah.
But it's a really, really well done little quiet panic scene, because you can just see her be like, because obviously it's taking her head, and she kind of goes, "What if I can't get home?"
Yeah.
And she wants to get home immediately, and then she does and finds her dad, and she's much more calm than after that. And after that point, she's like, "Okay," she just accepts it, and she's like, "Fair enough, time travel, it's all good."
Yeah, just that youthful innocence of children.
Yeah.
Just being completely fine with time travel.
Yeah.
The Marnie was.
When Marnie was there.
Okay.
Or as I used to consistently incorrectly refer to it, Marnie and me.
And Marnie and me. Better than Mac and me. So the sequences sort of tying into finding Marnie from Anna's point of view, who's been sent off into the woods. She walks across the marsh in low tide and comes to an abandoned mansion that's backed onto the sort of the bay, and she's sort of having these weird sort of daydreaming hallucinations of the building being different, and she ends up getting stuck there, and then the local fisherman, whose name is now slipping my mind,
I definitely wrote it down because I remember.
Who's known in the village because he doesn't talk, and all the kids take the mickey out of him, and he saves her basically, and then she apologises to him and goes back home. And you sort of get this ongoing events where depending on the height of the tide is depending if Marnie's going to be there or it's going to be real life. And I think with that movie in particular, the blending of, because it's animated and they haven't done anything to show I say this with air quotes, the dream sequences difference between when she's awake and when she's asleep, and then the lines get sort of blurred because the dream is etching into the waking world, and it has this very like fantasy but very soft fantasy feel going on the entire time, which is, it really helps to build the atmosphere of this movie. And you sort of have this girl who's struggling with her own identity and the way she reacts with other people being so accepted by this possible love interest, as you pointed out. And it's interesting watching her sort of almost borderline dive head first. Like, her entire life seems to revolve around trying to see this girl again.
Yeah.
And then with the interactions with her, she's like finally able to be herself.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
But then she still has the same effects. I thought the one that was pretty intense was the ballroom sequence.
Right.
Of her real, the way she projects herself to the real world, coming out again.
Yeah, she gets real panicked when all the attention is on her.
Yeah,
she freaks out. There's also, she has a moment where she panics when she's with the other girls, and she's in that like the what's it called, yukata?
Yeah, something along those lines.
And she makes that fat phobic comment, which is very unnecessary, but
yeah,
she's obviously just lashing out.
Yeah, because they have like a Halloween style event where they're, like, the kids are collecting candy from the neighbours and they're walking down the streets with lanterns in their traditional dress, and then they end up in a shrine and it's like she lights a candle and is given a wish card to put on the tree. And I liked watching like the background happen, and especially in Studio Ghibli movies, because there's so much going on that you never notice. Because again, there's a little bit more love, and it's not reaching we need to get it done by this date because it's the box office and it has to be done.
Yeah.
There's like a flow effect, and you can see it within the way the movie's crafted. And it's watching the background, like there's a there's a boy hanging up his wish in a tree, and there's a father holding his very young daughter up so she can hold, and he literally just boots her in the back of the head, and the kid turns around like, what the hell? And he's like, I don't apologise to the kid. The father,
and that's just what's happening in the background.
It's just what's happening in the background, which is stuck with me so instantly, because it was just one of those moments where it's just like, that doesn't happen in other movies that aren't like really well lovingly crafted. I couldn't tell you a single background character in any Marvel Universe movie. I don't know why I'm picking on Marvel today.
You just keep...
I think Schneider is it's too low for hanging fruit. So she has this wish. She writes a wish down, and she's just like, wish to have a normal day.
I wish to have a normal life every day.
Normal life every day.
Yeah.
Basically saying that she doesn't want to have these feelings of being isolated. And the opening sort of her opening monologue about the world being two circles. The circle you're in, and the one that's on the inside and the one that's on the outside, and she feels like she's on the outside of the circle. And it's like, that's kind of beautiful melancholy right there. And just that moment of like the forced to be friends because your mum's friends with in this case her aunties are friends with her mother. Yeah. And just being like, oh, you have to do that, you have to go hang out with these people. Yeah, yeah. And her reaction of just being like, no, and just having that outburst of her sort of defensive behaviour coming forward of just like they're judgmental against her.
So she's going to be judgmental to them?
Yeah. Yeah. She just goes for the low-hanging fruit, unfortunately, on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not... I think she recognises later on, or even in that moment, because she runs down and then she's like, this is why I hate myself. Yeah. Because I do things like this and I say things like this, and, and it does, I think that comes into... I think both movies are a really interesting exploration of mental health and mental illness and how it's perceived by children.
Yeah, because you said that after we left the cinema when we were going for lunch after the movie was over. Yeah, that's right, people. We have a real life. We don't just sit in our apartment watching movies.
I mean, mostly we do.
Shh, don't tell them. You mentioned it, how the fact that small moment of the childhood version of her mother saying, people can just be sad.
Yeah, I took down the quote because it's really interesting, because it's after, so we're all over the place in timelines here, but that's fine because so are the movies. But there is a certain point in the movie where she reveals where Nellie reveals to Marion that she is her daughter. Yeah. And Marion just accepts it. It's like, oh, it doesn't surprise me. But they have a whole conversation where they're very, very open. So throughout the whole of Petite Maman, adult Marion is absent. Yeah. So at the beginning she's emotionally absent, and then she's physically absent. She just leaves. She won't discuss how she's feeling. She won't discuss her grief. And we have this moment where 8-year-old Marion is asking 8-year-old Nellie, what she thinks of her, or how she's feeling, and she's like, you won't tell me, but you're sad all the time and whatever. And you start to see the effects of her mental health on her daughter. But then you have the 8-year-old Marion acknowledges that she feels that way then.
Yeah.
So she, as an 8-year-old, is already dealing with those mental health issues that she deals with as an adult. And she says to Nellie, it's not your fault that I feel that way. And Nellie's like, I feel like it is, I don't know. And then she says, you didn't invent my sadness.
Yeah.
And that's the quote that I took down, because that's just so poignant. It's like, yeah, it's a really interesting thing to have two children discussing in a movie.
Yeah. And
for a child to say that to her, to be like, listen, you feel like this is your fault, but you were not the origin of this, And then obviously, and when Marnie was there, you get, it's the same thing that Anna believes that, Marnie is the source of this without realizing it.
Yeah.
She says that her parents died and her grandmother died when she was young. And she says, I know it's not their fault that they were ill, but I can't forgive them for leaving me here alone.
Yeah.
And then you get a moment where Marnie she perceives that Marnie has abandoned her as well.
Yeah.
And she gets unbelievably upset about it. And then she has like this dream sequence confrontation with Marnie where she says, why did you leave me? And she, and Marnie asks her to forgive her. And then when you find out that she is the grandmother, it's like, okay, she has perceived for her whole life that her grandmother abandoned her.
Yeah.
And that is the source of her mental health issues. She's got huge abandonment issues. She's very isolated. And she feels unloved. And it's when she's able to forgive that she's able to then, have actual relationships with people.
Yeah.
So they're really, really interesting explorations of mental health from a child's perspective.
Yeah, they're really well crafted, and obviously a lot of work was put into it, more than we could talk about from our sort of club-handedness. I don't know. I was going to say club-footedness, but that's not right. Clubbing away at the idea of just like trying to give you the best sort of perspective of these movies in 30 to 40 minutes. It's only been 16.
I don't know how long it's been because I've just realised I haven't got the timer going.
Doesn't matter. So there's going back and forth between these movies. There's lots of similarities and then a huge, massive difference where it comes to with Nellie and Marion's relationship. It's literally mother and daughter. Like they're cast two very similar looking sisters.
Yeah, they're twins.
They are twins?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It's very clear from when they're there first that they're at least sisters.
Yeah.
But they're twins.
And then obviously within an animation it's easier to just draw people. But I was getting like, she has the character, Anna has blue eyes and a very westernized name to be living in Japan.
Yeah.
And the other characters actually pointed out at one point, talking about the fact, you've got blue eyes like a foreigner.
Yeah.
And then you see
I think that's the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
When they're saying you've got blue eyes like a foreigner, that's when she snaps and calls her a fat pig.
Yeah. Savage. So that whole... sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. Hang on, I'm reversing back to the station.
It's okay.
So yeah, she goes through and has these moments of like trying to connect with Marnie and Marnie's life of this sort of like wealthy family, and there's like the way it's projected and the way Marnie's projecting it is this like sort of lavish luxury lifestyle where she's got a nanny and her parents are globe-trotting and she's got servants and she lives in this mansion. And then she ends up talking, Anna ends up talking to her best friend after like the discovery of the diary, and the new girl who's moving into the mansion is being renovated. So like this sort of the ghost of Marnie is sort of being slowly removed. I was going to say excised, but that's not...
Exercised.
Yeah. But it's not really that as a forceful manner. It's sort of just like the slow creep of time.
Yeah.
From this, once lavish mansion with, rich people living in it to, run-down countryside, and then sort of like this renewal rebirth with like actual living people occupying the house.
Yeah, and they're doing a renovation and things.
Yeah. And then talking to her friend and like the fact that like it's all well and good that she spoke, like she had this amazing childhood where her family were like had, you know, amazing parties with all their friends and they had all this, but then in reality she was being abused. And the maids tortured her and a nanny tortured her and her parents were never home and you're just like, and it's that very similar premise that Anna's going through where the world that she's projecting isn't the real one. And it sort of becomes in this, like I was saying, like the sort of the event between, not an event, I'm trying to picture it in my world. I'm just losing my words here.
Okay, it's okay. Take a breath.
Take a breath. the thing, what's the word I'm talking about? The between reality and sub-reality, like the mirror world, the event horizon between reality and this dream sequence. You're just looking at me like total. What the hell are you? I don't know
what word you're looking for. I mean, were none of those a connection?
Yeah, the veil. The veil between the two worlds.
You are spiking our audio, and I hope it doesn't sound horrible.
The veil between this sort of fantasy where she's hanging out with Marnie and in her real life gets more and more blurred.
Yeah,
and it sort of continues on as she's very in love with this girl and she's sort of reliving these traumatic moments in Marnie's life, not understanding how she has that knowledge.
Yeah.
And then near the end of the movie where it's revealed, you know, the whole lineage where, you know, Marnie's husband, who was her best friend, who you see her dancing with in the ball sequence, married her and whisked her away from her sort of abusive life at home. And then she had a daughter, and then her husband died of an illness, and then you have the daughter going to boarding school and coming back very willful and independent, and then moving away with her partner, and then dying in a car accident, which I thought was ironic because they live on a motorcycle, which is way more likely to kill you.
Yeah.
And then Marnie getting her granddaughter back, and that's when you find out how she knew all this stuff about Marnie. Was the fact that she was telling her stories of her childhood to her as like bedtime stories. I'm done with my rant. There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting because they do have a heart-to-heart about it as well, because they have that moment where they're talking and Anna is saying, you know, I wish I had your life because, you know, my parents are dead, I live with a foster mother, and Anna's like, Marnie is saying, well, you know, your foster parents must love you a lot to have taken you in, and she's like, no, well, I found a letter that they're getting money to raise me, so they're only raising me because they get money for it, I don't have a family, I don't belong anywhere, and then Marnie turns around and says to her, well, I wish I had your life, because she's like, I've shown you the parties, but I am alone most of the time. So it's great when my parents are there, it's great when their friends are there, but other than that, it's just me and this nanny who pulls me around the place and locks me in and brushes my hair too hard, and people don't believe that I'm being bullied, but it hurts so much I cry. And then she talks about the maids who are sisters who tried to drag her up to the silo to lock her in because she's afraid of it, and and you get to see this side of her and see that she's also experiencing this same loneliness and the same kind of emotional feelings and the same kind of mental health issues that Anna is dealing with. Marnie is also dealing with for slightly different reasons. And then when you get towards the end when they visit her friend who had been her friend in childhood, and she tells them her whole life story, like you were just saying, you learn that she was taken out of this life by her husband, and then he fell ill and died, and she was committed to a sanatorium because of her mental health issues, and she didn't have the capacity to look after her child. which is why Emily got sent away. And that's similar to what's happening in Petite Maman as well, because you get a lot of the sources of Marion's mental health issues are the fact that she is being raised by a single mother who is too ill to raise her.
Yeah.
So she is essentially raising herself and looking after her mother. And in the snippet of time that we get to see her, it's her coming up to a surgery as well, so she is also ill.
Yeah.
And she's obviously then going to be internalizing this feeling of, well, what if I end up like my mother?
Yeah.
Which is why she's asking Nellie then, what am I like as an adult?
Yeah. There was a fabulous scene in Petite Maman, which is the sequence where the dad says to Nellie, you know, you can't go and stay over unless you're invited. And, you know, then when Marion turns up and is like, oh no, can she come stay? So, you know, they're going, oh, we're leaving tomorrow. It's like, oh no, can we like stay an extra day? Like, no, we can't. Like, yeah, I want to stay an extra day. There is no time other than now.
Yeah.
And that adorable sequence where they're making, this says pancakes, but they're not making pancakes.
Yeah, they're crepes.
Yeah. And just, like you said, it feels like that they were just told, here's ingredients, here's a rough idea of how to make them, just go and roll the camera.
Yeah, it's a very, very sweet film because there's a lot of really deep moments in it and really interesting explorations and things, but then they do have these moments where they're clearly just like letting children be children. So it's the first time Nellie goes into the forest by herself and she's just like picking up acorns and things and throwing rocks at each other, playing marbles with rocks. And it's like they just went, okay, put a child in the forest, let's see what she does.
Yeah.
And then you get that crepe scene where they're, you know, they've just been given up shit, like a whole lot of ingredients, and they're breaking eggs everywhere and giggling and getting flour all over the place. And then she tries to flip the crepe and it flies onto the counter. And they're giggling. It's the first time you see them be like properly like children. And then also one of my favourite things, and they do it twice, and the second time is even more hilarious, but they decide they're going to like act out a play together, or they're going to do like a...
And the prep work for it as well is amazing.
Prep work. That is exactly, I'll tell you straight up, that's exactly what I was like as a child.
Yeah.
To the point that I tried to make my friends like film this make-believe thing that we were doing. But it's, they decide they're going to like play a game where they're these characters and they're like, okay, so I'm going to be the countess and you get to be the inspector and I'm going to be this, you know, and they're splitting up characters. And then you get this scene where, you know, Nellie is wearing a tie and a waistcoat, and Marion is, I can't remember what she's wearing, like jewelry and stuff.
Yeah.
And they have this whole like made up conversation where they're like talking, and she's like, my husband has died, and you know, they're being very dramatic about it, and then they start giggling. They're like, you're really good at this. And then when they come back to do it later, it's so dramatic because they don't tell you that they're going to do it again. So that time you have like the whole lead up to it, but the second time they don't tell you, and then you just see that she's back in that costume. And they're talking about, they're like, it's been a year since you were here, but I'm glad you've come back. And then she takes out like a doll and she's like, this is our child.
Yeah.
And it's so good. I thought it was fantastic. But it's so, you know, it really, really, it kind of hammers home that these are children that are dealing with these issues.
There's only one negative point I have for that is because one of the big things that Nellie said is that she didn't feel like the last time she said goodbye to her grandmother was like adequate for actually saying goodbye.
Yep.
And then she has a moment where she could have said goodbye really well, but
I think that's what she does. So it's not that she wanted to do a big gesture, but she says, I didn't know it was the last time.
Yeah.
So I think then you get that moment where she gets, you know, in the past she says goodbye to what she knows is her grandmother, even though her grandmother doesn't know it. And they really linger on it, that she says goodbye and then it's just standing there because she knows that she got to say it.
Yeah.
And then when she goes back to the past, at that point her mother is there.
You mean Back to the Future?
Back to the Future, sorry, yes. I've forgotten how time works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because one of the things that I found really interesting is for a section of the film, she's going and visiting Marion in the past, and she's saying, "Oh, you know, you can't come over to my house because it's all the atmosphere is bad there because my mother." And she's like, "Oh, because your grandmother died." She said, "No, because my mother left." But then you get to the point where she tells her that she's her daughter, and they have that whole conversation, and then she wants to come to the house to see it in the future, and so she brings her. And the composition of that scene where she enters the house, so it's the camera is down the end of the hall, and you can see like walls on either side, and then just like a center point in the room, and she steps in by herself into that and is just standing, and she's just really small, right in the center of the screen, with just all this empty space around her, and this like corridor that you're looking down, and just like I just feel like throughout the whole movie, the cinematography and the composition is fantastic.
Yeah,
but that one really stood out to me, that they have this, you know, she stepped in here, and she knows that her mother has just died this week in the future, and this is her future. And it's really interesting to see how they visually show that kind of isolation and that overwhelmingness of that whole thing. It was just really well done. Yeah. It was really, really well done.
I got almost nothing left.
Yeah.
So, continue on if you like. We're not going to get box offices and ratings on these movies, are we?
Yeah, we can. There's no... So the box office so far for Petite Maman seems to be about just under $1 million, I think. Yeah, 984,996. But that's the figure I got from the Numbers website, whereas on Wikipedia it still says it's like 500,000. So I imagine it's going to just continue to go up. But I have no idea.
The only people in the theatre. It's just I don't think independent French films do very well in New Zealand. Like I'm pretty sure the ladies behind us
were French. Well, they were speaking French.
Yeah.
Well, there was trailers for another independent French film coming out that we both were like, "Oh, that looks good. We should see that." So,
which one was that one?
The one about the chef.
Oh yeah,
at the beginning of the revolution. Yeah. So there's definitely an audience for it, but I feel like more often around film festival time. That's when you get a lot of that. But there's definitely an audience for it. When Marnie was there, the budget was 1.15 billion yen, which is apparently about 10.5 million US dollars. And box office then was 3.85 billion yen, so 36 million US dollars. So it made over 3 times the budget.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. On IMDb, when Marnie was there, it's got a 7.7, and currently Petite Maman has 7.4. I actually think it's a better film. That's probably blasphemous to say that I think Petite Maman is better than a Ghibli film, but I don't know. There's something more intimate about it.
If I could delete my memory and watch one of those movies again, it'd be Petite Maman.
Yeah.
Not
when Marnie was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I think Ghibli, I think fantasy, over-the-top spectacle, you know, being my favourite. It's all out of order. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is one, post-apocalyptic, and two, like, insane with giant monsters and craziness, and again, a young girl facing against things that are, you know, bigger than her. So I think Patrick Stewart.
In the English dub. So as a Ghibli film, I think When Marnie Was There is quite understated. It's very soft, quiet, but it's not the same level of intimacy that you get from Petite Maman.
No, especially with, like, because I think we went through the cast list and it was the 2 sisters, the dad, and then the mum played...
She didn't... I looked it up. It's 2 different actresses, the mum and the grandmother. They look
very similar.
They look very similar. Yeah. It's like the casting of Dark, where you get all the people at different ages and they look like the same person.
Yeah.
So the grandmother and the mother were 2 different actresses, but they did look quite similar, to the point that we both thought it was the same actress.
So that's 5 people for the entire movie.
And then, like, 2 old ladies really at the beginning.
3, yeah.
For a couple... 3 old ladies, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, so it's very, very small cast. And that's pretty much all set in the same house, but in 2 different time periods. And then the forest linking it. except for that opening scene. So it's there's something very, very intimate about it. It also feels very honest. It feels very real. Like, that feels like we're watching a snapshot of someone's life, even though it does obviously have supernatural elements to it.
Yeah.
It feels very real. It doesn't feel like fantasy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So there's sort of like there's moments in Marnie Was Here where things happen that had come off as very supernatural, and because it's animated, it doesn't have the same sort of gravity as it would have been if it was live action. But then, there's other sequences that were done because it wasn't live action, because you couldn't have an actress who's in, just a young teenager walking across and almost drowning in marsh like a whole bunch of times, and then the waves hitting her and stuff was like really insane. Yeah. Like that's some, Hogwartsy-esque. So it's Harry Potter is the franchise. There's sequences where they get like the young actors get hit by like waves and stuff. I think it's Chamber of Secrets. Right, yeah. And then you see the behind the scenes and realize they're just like, it's like someone off the screen just splashing them with like a bucket and all the rest of the water's all hit, But with this, obviously, being that it's animated, like the moment where she gets, like, when she's like crying out to her, Marnie's stuck in her locked into her bedroom and literally like sort of like very Inception kind of way, where the water's like hitting her and trying to push her away and they're trying to drive them apart.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think having it as an animated... So I think When Marnie Was There is based on a book originally, but I think having it in an animated film means that you can blur that line between dream and reality quite a bit, so you're never quite sure what's real and what's not, and then you get the reveal that Marnie is real, and at that point Anna's like, oh, I thought I made her up. Yeah. But they find her diary, and then they find the older lady who was friends with her, and then later on she finds out that she was her grandmother. But she just thought she dreamed her. Yeah. Or invented her out of loneliness.
And it's possible because there's a sequence where it shows her when her parents are dead and she's getting adopted and she's holding a doll. And you don't see the face of it, but it's dressed the exact same way with the long blonde hair and the blue dress like Marnie is, which is... It's very... some other... I can't remember which one it is, but there's some other Ghibli moments where they have something very similar. Might be My Maneba Totoro. Yeah, where one of the creatures is like a doll at some point.
Yeah, I definitely thought the kind of memory stuff was very Spirited Away. Yeah. Where when she's with Marnie and Marnie asks her what it's like to live with the family she's living with there, she can't quite remember them. And when she remembers them, Marnie is gone and she's in a different place. And then she forgets Marnie exists for a couple of days, and when she remembers, she has to try really hard to remember. So there's this weird blurring of like, if she stays too long in Marnie's world, she'll forget who she is. Which I thought was...
And we were talking lots about Labyrinth the other day, weren't we?
About Labyrinth, yeah. So it is very Labyrinth as well, actually, yeah. But I was thinking Spirited Away with the...
If she takes your name, you won't remember who you are, and you'll never be able to go back.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a theme through some...
God, that studio makes some damn good movies.
Yeah. They make some really good movies. This was the last one they made for a while. They took quite a bit of a hiatus, I think, after When Marnie Was There.
Yeah, because for me, and looking at my collection, it's the ones that are set in sort of a reality that I don't have in my collection. Like I think the closest, but even that sort of alternate history, which is Porco Rosso, and the guy's a pig man. That's the closest, because I don't think there was ever like pirates versus biplanes sort of mid-between World War One and World War Two. Yeah. Fighting it out over some islands.
It's funny though, because I like was Only Yesterday and Whisper of the Heart and From Up on Poppy Hill, which are all kind of set in our world, whereas you like them much more fantasy.
Yeah, I like The Cat Returns and...
Nausicaa.
And my mind's going blank. Oh, Ponyo is probably the most modern one I bought. And even that's sort of like...
Yeah.
borderline on a like an old fisherman's tale.
Yeah, I saw when Marnie was there in cinema the first time around. It was funny, as I saw it in the Lighthouse Cinema in Dublin. And then we saw Petite Maman in the Lighthouse Cinema.
It's all connected, man.
It's just a different Lighthouse Cinema.
We got anything else?
No, I don't think so, really. I was trying to skim through my notes, but I feel like we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah.
We covered all of my notes, I think, from Petite Maman. Except, like, things like, I mentioned that there's, like, biscuit tins filled with miscellaneous knickknacks, which all adds to the realness of it, because I feel like everywhere I went as a child had biscuit tins with, like, sewing stuff in it.
Yeah, there's a meme about that recently, and it was like, when you're looking for a sewing kit, and you open the sewing kit, but it's got biscuits in it, and you're confused.
Yeah. I took note of the fact that when she brushes her teeth, she actually rinses afterwards.
Yeah, I noticed that too when we were watching the movie.
Because that's something that's your pet peeve in movies, is people rinse, or is people brush their teeth and then just either leave it or just spit and walk off, and you're like, you've got a mouth full of toothpaste.
It's the other thing is that the one sequence will have, like, clearly they've got toothpaste foam in their mouth.
Yeah.
And the next sequence because it's usually from a shot from the side where they lean over the sink.
Yeah.
And then they'll stand back up with a camera will be reflecting off the mirror.
Yeah.
And there's and I've got a beard, right? It's in the thumbnail. It's a true fact. I have to wash my face after I brush my teeth because I get foam in my mustache and in my beard, and it's there's no physical way unless I was like having an airtight seal around my toothbrush when I was brushing my teeth. And one of those things, and that annoys the crap out of me because it
happens so often in movies.
Yeah, and it just takes out of reality.
I can't stop noticing it now that you.
I've broken you.
Every time I watch someone brush their teeth in a movie, I'm like, well, they didn't rinse.
But she rinsed and spat.
So she spat, and then she got a cup of water, drank some, or like put some of it in her mouth and rinsed and spat that out as well. So I was like, 10
out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Just for that one sequence.
Yeah, we'll give it a 10 out of 10 for the fact that they actually rinse. But again, it adds to the realness.
Sequel to this podcast, which is It Takes Toothbrush, where we watch movies with
if anyone wants to recommend any movies where people actually brush their teeth properly, we'll watch those.
What was the one that someone pointed out recently to me?
I don't know.
Oh, Jessica Jones doesn't know how to wash her hands. She just does like this with a soap and like rinses her hands and walks out, and it was like gross. Yeah, it's funny because they're obviously trying to cut time because people don't want to sit and watch someone brush their teeth fully or wash their hands fully in a movie, but it's just don't put the sequence in.
Just
like for at least with Underwater, it's setting the mood. Like that whole sequence with Kay Stewart brushing her teeth in the beginning of the movie, setting the mood of the entire lead up to, like, this is where you are, like, underwater, like, it feels like you're dead, basically.
Yeah.
And that whole lead up and the explosion and all that's like, but just, you need she could have had it in the shower. They could have picked several other reasons why you'd be up at like 3 a.m. in the morning by yourself with nobody else around. Yeah. But just, my rant about it'll come up later.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll come up. It probably has come up. Like, no, I don't remember talking about it before.
It doesn't matter.
But yes. Anyway, this movie, she rinses, and it adds to the realism because it feels like a real moment.
Yeah.
It's like the fake drawing the hair.
The crepes and the kids drawing themselves, and then her getting home after the panic attack and her dad being like, your jersey's inside out, and they're fixing it for her. Yeah. And she does that adorable kid thing where she just sticks her arm straight up in the air. Yeah, it's very cute. She doesn't eat a lot. That was one of the things I noticed with that. Every time she sits down for food, she doesn't eat it. There's like the moment the cereal.
She's eating the cereal, and then she just downs the milk and leaves the cereal.
And you can still see it. And obviously, so the director would have been like, don't eat too much of it because you might have to do it again. Yeah. To the point where the tape that they used, you can still visibly see cereal. Yeah. Now, what I found interesting is how delicious all the food looks like in Ghibli. Oh, yeah. And you were like, I want that, even though it was like fried egg. Ghibli
make food look amazing. I was like, oh, that egg looks like the nicest egg you've ever seen in your life. Like, I want to eat that. Yeah. Even though I haven't eaten an egg in like 12 years or something. Yeah. Yeah, all the food those tomatoes looked amazing in that film.
Yeah.
The cereal, this was a funny thing to me. I literally took down a note telling myself to look up the cereal afterwards from Petite Maman. I ate that cereal. I remember eating that cereal in France. That exact cereal she's eating. So I had to look it up. It's called Choco-Pic, apparently. It's like, it's a Nestle cereal, but it's like made, or it's mostly popular in Portugal, and then it's throughout continental Europe. But I remember eating that exact cereal in France, and it was like this like weird like click moment when she started eating it. I was like, I've just eaten that, because I'd totally forgotten it ever existed. But yeah, because you know me, I only eat chocolate cereal still as an adult.
Yeah.
But as a child, particularly.
I don't think anything's actually changed.
Yeah.
Maybe the milk's changed.
Yeah. No, you drink it with rice milk.
Yeah, and then obviously the cereal has to be.
Yeah,
vegan.
cereal has to be vegan.
Yeah.
Though I don't. I'm not eating much cereal nowadays. I'm trying to not just eat sugary cereal all the time.
You shouldn't have chocolate and sugar for breakfast, sweetie. It does not bode well for a good day.
Yeah, it does. You do that boost of energy rather than being.
That's not how energy works.
I know. Anyway, we should.
We're rambling on.
Yeah.
Find us on everything.
Yeah, so we're @takes2_pod on Twitter and Instagram. It Takes Two Pod on Facebook, and our website is ittakes2.co.nz.
Thank you, and we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.